Let's talk about a man who is a hero to some and a war criminal to others. I mean, this is the guy who gave humanity the moon, but he did it at a truly terrible cost. He was the celebrated architect of America's space program, a visionary who dreamed of the stars. But his journey to get there started in the absolute darkest corners of Nazi Germany. This is the unbelievable story of Wernher von Braun.
In America, this was the public face of Wernher von Braun. You'd hear him say things like, science and religion are not antagonists. They are sisters. He came across as this man of deep thought, of faith, a visionary who really saw space exploration as humanity's grand, almost spiritual destiny. He even partnered with Walt Disney, for goodness sake. He became a household name, and he sold the American public on the dream of the cosmos. This was the man they wanted you to see.
But behind that very carefully crafted image was a past that had been systematically hidden. See, he wasn't just some reluctant member of the Nazi Party, he was a commissioned major in the SS. And that rank, Sturmbannführer, it wasn't just handed to him. It came after a personal invitation from Heinrich Himmler, one of the main architects of the Holocaust. This wasn't some minor detail they overlooked. It was the central, damning conflict of his entire life.
So to really wrap our heads around this guy, we're going to follow his journey in 4 parts. First, we'll look at the 2 warring sides of his identity. Then, the dark bargain he struck to achieve his dream. Next, his stunning reinvention as an American icon. And finally, we'll grapple with the deeply contested legacy he left behind for all of us. Okay, so how on earth does a man with a past that dark become a celebrated American hero? To figure that out, we have to go right back to the beginning. Back to a pure scientific ambition that would pretty soon be compromised by the brutal politics of his time.
Wernher von Braun was born into this world of fading Prussian nobility. You know, privilege and tradition. But his eyes were always on the stars, ever since his mother gave him a telescope when he was just a boy. That obsession led him to amateur rocket clubs. But as private funding dried up in a collapsing Germany, a powerful new patron showed up, the German military. They saw his rockets, and they saw the future of warfare. And this, right here, was the first step down a very, very dark road.
And this is exactly where the story takes its dark turn. See, to build the rockets that were powerful enough to actually reach space, von Braun needed money, materials, and manpower on a scale that only one group could provide, the Nazi regime. Now, he privately called Hitler a pompous fool with a Charlie Chaplin mustache, but that didn't stop him from becoming a loyal servant of the dictatorship. When it came down to a choice between his conscience and his cosmic ambition, he chose the cosmos. The Third Reich needed weapons, he needed funding, and so a deal was made.
And the result of this bargain was the V2. I mean, it was a machine of terrifying beauty. It was the first man-made object to actually touch the edge of space, a whisper of the future we now live in. But it was also a weapon of indiscriminate destruction, a thunderbolt of vengeance, they called it, designed to terrorize civilians.
And as a weapon, it was absolutely devastating. Thousands of V2s rained down on cities like London and Antwerp, killing around 5,000 people, both civilians and soldiers. But the lethal impact of this thing wasn't just felt where it landed. No, there's a far darker story in how it was built.
An estimated 20,000 concentration camp prisoners died building the V2. Just let that number sink in for a second. Far more people died manufacturing the weapon than were ever killed by it. This is the ethical black hole at the very heart of the whole program.
You see, after Allied bombs destroyed their original facility, production moved underground to a factory called Mittelwerk, with labor supplied by the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp. Survivors called it a surreal world of suffering, a literal man-made hell where people were starved, beaten, and worked to death to build Wernher von Braun's rockets.
And von Braun wasn't some distant manager who was just unaware of the horror. Oh no, the historical record is crystal clear. He chaired the meetings, he reviewed the plans, he even personally traveled to the Buchenwald concentration camp to hand-pick the enslaved people who would build his machines. He was directly and knowingly complicit.
So as the Third Reich is crumbling, von Braun sees his chance. Along with his team, he makes this very calculated surrender to the advancing American army, not as a defeated enemy, but as a prize to be won. And this was the beginning of his astonishing transformation.
He came to the United States through a top-secret program called Operation Paperclip. The Cold War was just starting, and this high-stakes race was on to snatch up Germany's best and brightest scientists before the Soviets could. Their knowledge was considered a crucial weapon for the fight ahead.
But there was a catch. President Truman had a very clear rule: no ardent Nazis and no one involved in war crimes. So on paper, a guy like von Braun, an SS major whose project was literally built by slaves, he should have been facing a tribunal, not given a laboratory. So, how'd he slip through?
Well, the solution was chillingly simple and bureaucratic. The program actually got its name from the literal paperclips U.S. intelligence agents would attach to the files of scientists who had these inconvenient pasts. It was a quiet signal to just cleanse the record, to rewrite history, to erase the sins of men who were deemed too valuable to prosecute. Von Braun's past was effectively laundered.
And so, in America, you basically had two Wernher von Brauns existing at the same time. The public saw the charismatic genius, the guy who shook hands with Mickey Mouse and promised Americans the stars. But the hidden reality was the SS major whose crimes were deliberately buried in classified files, all to create an American hero for the space race.
And this brings us to the toughest question of all, doesn't it? How do we judge a man who is built on such a profound contradiction? His ultimate achievement, taking humanity to the moon, can never really be separated from its horrific origins.
And what an achievement it was. The Saturn V was a titan, an absolute masterpiece of engineering that still inspires awe today. With more than 7.5 million pounds of thrust, it was the most powerful machine ever built by humans, the chariot that would finally carry us to another world. It was the complete fulfillment of his lifelong dream.
But we can never, ever forget the shadow that stretches from the launch pad at Cape Canaveral all the way back to those dark tunnels in Germany. The triumph of the Apollo program is built on a foundation of unbelievable suffering. The Saturn V is the direct technological descendant of the V2, a weapon built by enslaved people.
On his gravestone, there's a quote from the Psalms: "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork." It's a final, mysterious statement from a man of profound and deeply disturbing contradictions, who spent his entire life looking up at the stars. And so we're left with this legacy that's as vast and as complex as the cosmos he so desperately wanted to explore. Wernher von Braun was a visionary, and he was an accomplice. He gave humanity one of its greatest triumphs, but the price was paid in blood. So how do we remember a man whose path to the heavens began in hell? That, really, is the question he leaves for us to answer.